Hi, Diana. It's great to see you.
Nice to see you, Leah.
So, Diana, as we know, there's two types of customers. We have our residential customers and we have sort of our big businesses. So specifically, when we look back at 2020 and the pandemic, how have electricity companies responded to residential customers in 2020, making them feel like sure that they won't lose out on power? And beyond that, how have they responded more to our commercial customers in 2020 as well?
Yeah, thanks, Leah. So members were really quick to respond to COVID-19 and both residential and commercial customers by doing immediate actions like halting disconnects and collections activities and offering flexible payment options and payment deferrals, and also halting planned work outages as well, and any maintenance that was all stopped, but also setting up funds that are specifically targeted to residential customers. So one member set up a COVID-19 relief fund that targeted those customers who had lost a job because of COVID-19, and eligible customers were able to get up to 3 months of credit on their hydro bill. And what I've seen across the country as well is members really provided assistance through community organizations like the United Way, and also through food banks as well. Yeah, so they were really quick to pivot. And then for the commercial and industrial customers, our members have really a personal relationship with those customers, so they were able to reach out to them directly and provide more tailored assistance and see what their specific needs were. But similar to the residential customers, they did things like halt disconnects and connections and all planned work, and also set up things like provide the security deposits back to small businesses who had cash flow issues. And also one member utility had also a special relief fund where they can get up to 3 months of charges on their utility bill.
Wow. So I think the pandemic has shown just how important reliable electricity is. So how do you think the pandemic might have shifted the way Canadians look at their local electrical utility?
Yeah, so what we've seen in our 2020 National Customer Survey results is that these direct actions that I just mentioned really impacted customer satisfaction across the country. So things like we've seen a real gain in areas like brand trust, for instance, and caring for the customer, transparency. Another thing would be being a good corporate citizen, and also in consulting the customer before making any decisions. So members, I think, because they have been so proactive, those actions were really seen in results from 2020, and that people have a positive perception of their local utility.
So Diana, customers have experienced a difficult year in 2020, and I think our members have responded accordingly. But with 2020 now behind us, we need to start thinking about the future challenges that customers might face. So what are some of those challenges, in your opinion, and how should utilities respond?
Yeah, I think, well, the pandemic isn't behind us, so it's very much a challenge for everybody, including customers and our member utilities. For example, in the commercial and industrial survey, we saw that 81% of C&I customers feel confident that they can make it through the second wave of the pandemic, but 16% said that they do not. So this represents a huge challenge not only for our sector, but also for the economy at large. And against that backdrop, we have the carbon tax, we have net zero by 2050 that's being legislated by the government. So electrification is going to be a big piece of that. We have to understand what those implications are. So electrification on the grid, innovation, expanding the grid, and making sure that while we're doing all of this, that rates are affordable for the customer. So a number of challenges for our member utilities, but also a number of opportunities as well.
So Diana, I'm glad you brought up the federal government because as the Canadian government starts to think about achieving net zero by 2050 and the decarbonization of the economy, what can we do to prepare Canadians for the possibility of changing prices?
So I believe education is the key. Canadians generally don't understand the electricity system. They don't understand, I believe, how it's operated, how it's regulated. Canada has one of the cleanest electricity systems with over 80% GHG-free emissions, and I don't believe that's widely known by the Canadian public. Additionally, we have some of the lowest electricity rates among the OECD countries, according to IEA stats, and I don't think people know that either. So I think as a sector, we need to have a very strategic and concerted effort to educate customers, to educate the government, to educate stakeholders on all of the innovative things we're doing as an industry, and in terms of being net zero ready. And in fact, in our survey, 2020 survey, 3 out of 5 Canadians supported a shift to a greener economy, and a majority of those people were familiar with the electricity system. So what that tells me really is that education is the key.
Great. Thanks, Diana. I think keeping customers top of mind is going to continue to be a priority for all electricity companies.
Definitely.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Leah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you here. So this has been a turbulent year for every workplace, and I think our employees have had 2 main types of challenges. I think first, we've had the group of employees who have shifted, well, quite suddenly and for long term from working from home. And second, we've had the large portion of our workforce that has had to continue to go into work to ensure reliable power for Canadians. So how did electricity companies ensure the safety of both these types of workers during COVID-19?
Well, I think our industry has been terribly resilient, and I think part and parcel of that is the culture, of course, because safety has always been such a tremendous focus for every employee working at whatever location, whether it's generation, distribution, transmission, whatever it may be. And so we've always had that storm mentality to a certain extent. So a lot of our utilities and our employers really were prepared to a certain extent for what happened. And a lot of organizations had good business continuity plans in place, and some companies, of course, were prepared as they had seen SARS a number of years ago. And some organizations actually had pandemic preparedness plans, but I don't think that anybody foresaw the challenges that we see. We're here today, we're almost 11 months past the beginning of the pandemic, as it were, and so we still have many people working from home and all of the things that go with that. So we've been well prepared, but yes, lots of challenges. So when you think about those 2 cohorts that you mentioned, thousands of workers working from home pretty much overnight. There's 2 different things there. Less of a concern from a physicality perspective, more concerns about mental health, for example, right? So because people are having to work with, challenges, working with children at the table, or worried about parents and worried about staying safe themselves. So we've seen a lot of effort and a lot of work done by employers to support employees in that area. And then for our essential critical workers, those who are still in the field, in the control room, day in, day out, power is 365, 24/7, so we need to make sure that we have the folks there. They have been, unsung heroes, and we've seen our employers do a lot of great things, whether it was plexiglass in the middle of the car to make sure that they're getting to the work site safely, even to renting RVs and hotel rooms for employees who had to go in to make sure that they were safe, and putting people into cohorts or bubbles that worked in teams. There were so many different things that we saw companies do to make sure that people were safe at every different stage of their workday.
That's great. I think the word resilient was so key during this whole pandemic. That's great. So just as a follow-up for this question, so you kind of noted that we could have never really seen the big challenges of COVID coming. So how do organizations prepare for challenges like COVID? And how does being flexible in the workplace sort of help solve these challenges that might come?
I think it's all about being deliberate, being flexible. I actually think we're living in a major experiment right now, and it's going to be really interesting to see how these things roll over the next year. We're almost 1 year in. So what did that, working remotely, people working from home, what did that look like? Did people like it? Did people hate it? There's pros and cons to both, and I've heard employees and leaders talk about this. For many people, they loved not having to commute. They loved not having to travel every day, whether it was 1 hour or 2 hours to get to work. For many, they missed the camaraderie, the communications, the opportunity to have those sort of sharing of knowledge moments, even the whiteboarding on a day-to-day basis. So I think leaders will really need to look at what has happened over this last 11 months. How have their organizations functioned? And what is the future of work going to look like going forward? I have to say, I do believe that the death of the office, I think that has been a little bit exaggerated. I do think we will get back to some semblance of normality. I think everything has gone electronic. Digitalization of policies and processes have been underway at all our employers. Some of those things will stay, they will remain, but I think many others are going to change the way that we work going forward. It's going to be a fascinating time. I think it really has accelerated that whole debate about the future of work by at least a decade. That is going to make a difference for employers who are looking to attract talent and who perhaps don't want to consider a hybrid working model. As an example, they want everybody back in the office. Well, some people may decide that that's not for them, and so they may not decide to continue working within that type of environment. So these are the types of things that employers are going to need to look at as they look at that workforce and what that workplace looks like going forward.
So I'm glad you brought up attracting top talent because I know that the electricity sector, going forward, you want the best talent, right? So how do you think tying things like ED&I and gender diversity help with getting the best people into our sector?
Well, I think at this stage we all know the business case for why we should be undertaking DEI initiatives and looking to ensure that we have the best people working in our workplaces. It has to be a very conscious decision by leaders to ensure that they are actually making time for this type of work, because until there's a sense of urgency and prioritization around the need to put in place DEI initiatives and practices that will really ensure that you have an inclusive workforce, we're not going to see change happen. There's been lots of talk about this for decade after decade after decade, and we know that our Canadian electricity industry does not represent the Canadian population in the way that we would like it to. We have a lot of work and a lot of catching up to do, but it is absolutely doable. And if you think about wanting to be an employer of choice, and of course, everyone wants to be an employer of choice, we need to look at attracting the best talent. We are going to have to compete with every other industry in Canada. We know the demographics. We know that there's not enough people coming through. We know that we're going to be competing for talent. So we need to do a better story. Employers need to tell a better story of what it is that they value within their organization and in their business. So they need to be very cognizant of looking at their board, looking at their annual report, does that reflect? Do you have women? Do you have Indigenous people? Do you have people of color represented in your industry? If you don't, why would you expect that a young person is going to actually want to work for you? And young people are paying attention to these types of things right now. People want to work where they feel like they can make a difference, and they want to work in an organization that they respect and that they feel is also making a difference and living their values as well. So it's really important, and it's not rocket science. It's not a difficult thing to do, but again, it needs to be a conscious decision. And I think we need to put in place, there needs to be accountability for making that happen.
Well, it sounds like there are some challenges ahead, but it sounds like the sector is well suited to take those on, especially as we showed how we could take on COVID-19. So that's great.
Yes, it's a great industry to work in. We have challenges, we have work to do, but I think there's a real momentum there. You mentioned from a societal perspective, Black Lives Matters. All of these things that are happening. I think they're an inflection point almost for us as a society, and so we really need to take advantage of what's going on to really make that change happen. It's not good enough to pay lip service to it and then start sliding backwards, but there are great things being underway right now by our employers. We see this every day. Great examples of things being done, great allies, great champions, people supporting each other. And that's what's always fun about working in this sector, is that people are really passionate about it. I've never seen an industry, I haven't worked in an industry where I've seen such passion for what people do. They're very proud of what they do. And sharing ideas, sharing best practices, I think that is what's going to propel us forward, so that over time, we're not even having to have a conversation about DEI and the need to ensure that we have all underrepresented groups with a seat at the table.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much, Michelle.
You're very welcome, Leah.
As you can appreciate from today's conversations, 2020 will forever be an important part of our history. We need to take these lessons as a sector, realize our vulnerabilities, and ensure our preparedness. We will build back better. This sector will continue to provide safe, reliable, and affordable electricity to Canadians, and will be essential to Canada's movement towards a low-carbon economy. Thank you to our sponsors, Electricity HR Canada and Oracle Utilities, and thank you for tuning in to the 2021 State of the Canadian Electricity Industry.